Geoff Dickinson, CEO of DMG Events and the president for UFI.
Potential for this region is absolutely huge. I mean, I've been here now nearly 30 years. Growth rates globally for events, it's about 10%. But if you look in this region, it's like 35%. It's extraordinary because so much is happening here. What you want when you run events, you want great venues. We have them here in this region. You want fantastic infrastructure, so you want great airlines. We have them here. You want the best hotels, and here you get some of the best hotels and best hospitality. And within literally a matter of weeks, we moved one of the world's largest events to Dubai purely because of the culture and attitude of this country.
Hello there and welcome to Eventful Arabia, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes on what's happening with events right across the Gulf. I'm Eithne Treanor, your host for the show, and today I'm absolutely delighted to have with us Geoff Dickinson. Geoff, of course, is the CEO of DMG Events and the president for UFI 2023-2024. Geoff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Eithne. It's great to be with you.
Bring us back, I suppose, a little bit, not quite a history lesson, but you have a very distinguished career in the events industry. Talk to us a little bit maybe about the changes you've seen in the sector as they've happened, and then what happened when the Gulf and when the UAE and everybody almost came into the picture, because there was a time that this region perhaps wasn't top of everybody's list.
You're absolutely right. I came into events a really long time ago now, something in the region of about 40 years ago. So it's an extraordinary amount of time. I originally qualified as a lawyer, but didn't see myself being one, and then fell into events and stayed ever since. And then I also did something very strange. In 1994, having quite a good career in the UK, I decided to go with a company and acquire some events in Dubai. And people were amazed at the time, thought it was backwater, no chance, no opportunity. But I could see it. What you see really with events is when economies are opening and they want new ideas, new thinking, new products, that's the time to bring in more and more events. And so much as people were amazed and surprised that I came here, I think equally a lot of them are surprised at actually how much this region has grown, how big the events are here, and how much following they now have.
Now, talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, the concept of an event. You know, it's nothing new, really. And we were just talking before the show, too, about, you know, even if we look back in history, the idea of a gathering to discuss things, to move it forward, to go into then almost breakaway sessions. You know, you didn't invent this. You're definitely enhancing it without a doubt. But I suppose talk to me a little bit about the fact that we need to embrace the fact this has been around a long time.
You're absolutely right. I mean, from the very beginning of human civilization, people realized that if human beings collaborated and got together, shared new thinking and shared new ideas, that they would survive. Because if you go back to the first humans on the plains of Africa, they could either have become prey or they could find prey. If they roamed around individually on their own on the plains of Africa, they would have been eaten by lions or by cheetahs. But if they actually got together and invented new tools and collaborated, then they could find prey and they could survive. So it was those first meetings really around the campfire of sharing those ideas that was really the first start point of events. And then they grew into marketplaces, they grew into bigger meetings. They became events on the crossroads of Europe, on the Silk Route and other places. So they've really been around for thousands of years.
And when we look at, of course, where they are now, I mean, definitely it has been enhanced around the way. We're very honoured, of course, in this region to have the president of an international organisation with us here. You've been the president of UFI for 23-24. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that organisation, its scope, and indeed how it looks into events.
UFI is incredibly important. I mean, I realised more so than ever in my life, actually, when COVID came along. I mean, COVID was, as you and I have talked about before, Eithne, a proving ground. I mean, a lot of people thought for the events industry, it was the end. But actually, it was the absolute proving ground because people have been saying for years and years pre-COVID that technology would replace events. People would go online for meetings, they wouldn't travel anymore. And then COVID came and all these people believe now they were proved right that events would go away and be replaced by technology. And there were a lot of advances in technology during that period. A lot of meeting platforms online became a lot better. But going back to our earlier conversation about why events started, the sheer fact that human beings need to get together to exchange new ideas and to see new products and new thinking is so vital. And what happened was when COVID went away, events actually grew stronger. Now, UFI played a very key part in that because during COVID, it held the events industry together and actually proved human collaboration. So all the heads of events companies during COVID met online through UFI and discussed how to get going again, even during restrictions, right? How they would make events safe for people to attend, how they would observe the correct protocols and look after people's health and safety and transact safe events to get going again. And so through UFI and through UFI collaboration, events did get going again. And after COVID, they've done incredibly well and grown enormously. But UFI plays a key role in that. It always looks at what are the key issues for the events industry. That's what it consistently does. And now COVID, thankfully, is in the back mirror now. It looks at what are the issues facing the events industry today.
And I guess the one thing we forget sometimes that the events industry needs an event as well. So many events to actually talk with your peer group to see what's doing and how you actually coordinate, manage and enhance events around the world. It's your own meeting place, is it, in a way?
You're absolutely right. UFI gets together for a number of events every year. They have a global congress that this year will take place in Cologne, which is very appropriate because it's Cologne this year celebrating 100 years. So a great place for UFI to have its global congress. It has congresses also then around the regions. So it has in the Middle East this year, and Africa, we're in Rwanda. It has Southeast Asian one, which was in Macau. It has ones in Latin and North America. And so you're right. I mean, apart from actually being organisers of major global events and meetings, we use meetings ourselves to get together, talk about new ideas, new thinking, and again, to see new products, because one of the other key things that UFI is looking at is how we embrace and utilise new technologies such as AI.
And I want to talk about that a little bit later. But right now, talk to me a little bit about DMG Events. This is a global company and it's present in many, many areas around the world, started in the UK. You've been president since 2010, and you've actually grown this here in the region particularly, and introduced the biggest energy show in the world in the region. That's one thing DMG can claim. I mean, congratulations on that. But talk to me about that process of growing an event group like that here since that time.
It's been tremendously exciting. Actually, as I was saying earlier, I first came out here in 1994 with a different event organizer at that point, and I bought a couple of shows and saw those events scale incredibly quickly. And then I launched two businesses of my own. One I sold to Messe Frankfurt, which became Messe Frankfurt Middle East, and then I launched another business and I sold that. And DMG Events came along and they asked if I would take over as their global CEO. And I said to them, I would, but one of the conditions was it would be based in Dubai in the Middle East, because I could see, one, that's where my real passion and expertise was, and two, it was actually where the majority of their portfolio was. So it made more sense to be here. And
you could see the potential for this region as well.
Potential for this region is absolutely huge. I mean, I've been here now nearly 30 years, and it's consistently grown throughout that entire 30 years. And the lovely thing is, what you always want to see in any business you're in any industry you're in, I can't see that changing in the next 10 to 20 years. I can still see an extraordinary amount of growth in this region. We talked earlier today, and you were saying, what's the kind of growth rates globally for events? And globally, it's terrific. It's about 10%. But if you look in this region, it's like 30, 35%. It's extraordinary because so much is happening here.
And again, come back to DMG. You have, as I said, the biggest energy show in the world. This is one of the areas that everybody is interested in. Every other event that I do, we talk about energy, we talk about the environment, we talk about sustainability. But bringing this together and bringing global leaders to Abu Dhabi every year, you used to do it every 2 years, but it really became top of the global agenda, didn't it, that you are doing this? And it's, well done. It's a hugely successful event.
I think it shows what you can do here, actually, because a lot of people as well were, in disbelief that the UAE or this region could lay claim to holding some of the world's largest events. I actually enjoyed people saying that to me years ago, because I knew that we would win. I knew that here you have incredible hotels, hospitality, all the infrastructure you need to run events. What you want when you run events, you want great venues. We have them here in this region. You want fantastic infrastructure, so you want great airlines. We have them here with Emirates and Etihad, fabulous airlines. You want the best hotels, and here you get some of the best hotels and best hospitality, because when you've got VIP guests, the heads of global energy companies, you've got to look after them well, and this region does it well. And then beyond that, which is something you asked me, in the past, is how important is government involvement, and government involvement is absolutely key critical, because when you want to make an event consequential, you want heads of state or ministers to be there to give the event that kind of high level blessing. And here the government is amazing. The way that they reach out, we work very closely, as you know, with Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, who's the head of ADNOC and also minister for AI in Abu Dhabi, and also was incredibly the COP president this year, and did an extraordinary job. And his involvement in ADIPEC, which is, as you rightly say now, the world's largest, by quite a long way, energy event, is really down to what this country offers in terms of venue and facilities and infrastructure, and down to government backing and support. It's just extraordinary here. It makes this region just one of the best places in the world to work for events.
Elaborate just a little bit on that need for collaboration. A lot of different partners come together to put on a hugely successful event. I mean, the collaboration with the government, and that's a great example of, what's driving that, because it's very much a partnership in that sense. But other event players who come here and they're looking at the region, they need to make these relationships. And really, this is what it's all about, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, as I say, I came to Dubai, some 30 years ago, and I've done a lot of events in Dubai. And one of the people I reach out to a lot is Halal Al-Mari, who runs tourism in the economic department here. He's a truly fabulous human being on every level, very smart, very kind. And when we got towards the end of COVID, we have a very big event which you've often been at with us, which is Gastech, and we were in another part of the world who suddenly imposed new COVID restriction, which made the event completely untenable. And we reached out to Halal Al-Mari here, and suddenly he made everything available. Venue was available, freed up hotel stock, helped us get deals on all kinds of services that we needed to buy at the last minute, contacted His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, who then agreed that he would actually support the event, went out with Suhail Al-Mazroui and got him to invite all the ministers, and within literally a matter of weeks, we moved one of the world's largest events to Dubai, purely because of the culture and attitude of this country, the way that people work with you. So you're right. It's vital that you forge those government stakeholder relationships, because when you need them, they really count. They really matter. They make a huge difference.
I remember that well, and it was a hugely successful event. A lot of work gone into that, but well done. Let's have a look back in terms of, what happened during COVID and the sort of when it put the brakes on. But also let's look wider at geopolitical events and other events that are almost out of control, out of an organizer's control. How do you actually maybe plan, mitigate? I mean, how do you deal with that? And some you can look back in hindsight and say, we've moved on from that. But I suppose it's something you have to have always on the agenda there as risk aversion, sort of in risk management.
You're absolutely right. I mean, as an event organizer, I would always say to people, it's a great career. I've been in it 40 years. I wouldn't have done anything different. But you live with all the time risk that maybe something happens, within the region, maybe something happens that you get an economic downturn that will impact the size and scale of event that you run. Maybe a storm comes in and affects the venue. So you have to have lots of kind of plan B's, C's and D's with every event that you run. You've always got to have what do you do if suddenly a storm hits the venue? How will you deal with that? You have to have backup teams and contractors ready in place. Got to have insurance for the worst case to make sure that you cover yourself and customers as well if you need to pay anything back. And you also sometimes have to have plan C, D, that you go to a different place, as we did in COVID with Gastech when we suddenly moved to Dubai. We often, with events, sometimes if we've got any concerns about an area or a region, we often have a plan B to go to a second place that we know have the capability to host the event and the scale and consequence that we need.
And consequently, or occasionally, you had to pull on that plan B. But wise planning, as you'd only expect. But talk to me a little bit, as the region grows here and the events sector grows and all of that, surely it presents not maybe problems, but challenges that maybe we haven't looked at, because now, you know, the population's growing, the event is growing. Do we have enough space? Do we have enough venues? Is the infrastructure there? All of that, and looking at even a wider Gulf region, not just the UAE.
So it's a very good question. I mean, we operate right the way across the region here, particularly in the Middle East and particularly in Africa. We operate globally, 10 offices around the world, but very much, as you know, Middle East and Africa are our focus. And in some areas, we're blessed with very good venues. Dubai World Trade Center is an excellent venue, and at the moment is good for the capacity and size of shows that we run. Adnek in Abu Dhabi is a good venue. Saudi Arabia is incredibly exciting right now, but we don't have the right size of venue, and we often have to build tents and facilities 3 times the size of the venue that we hire. And for a lot of international clients and customers, it's not quite what we want to show them, right? We want to show them the very best of Arabia and the very best facilities. So we are challenged. And the same happens to a greater extent in some African countries, where the opportunities there, these African countries are developing at pace. They want events because they want to embrace, again, the reason why events exist, new thinking, new ideas, new technologies, but they lag behind very often with, as you rightly say, with the venue and infrastructure. So this whole region at the moment, apart from really the UAE and Qatar, but the whole region really at the moment, and Oman to a degree, needs more investment in venues.
Yeah, no, we hear that from so many people, and having been to Saudi, there's 1 or 2 areas, and one is maybe too big, and all the rest are too small. So there's nothing in between, and I think, but they're aware of that. I think they're working on that one pretty fast, and hopefully they'll be able to deliver something for you, because definitely I think they want to be seen as you know, the location that can actually house and hold. And they do a few mega events, but they'll be working on more, I think. Talk to me a little bit about, because of that, do you have the talent? Do you have the staffing that you need? I mean, is that available? Because probably a couple of years ago when you came, it might not have been.
No, when I first came here, actually, which stands us in good stead now, there were hardly any people that had any exhibitions experience at all 30 years ago. And so you really had to try and attract people from other industries to come in, because quite often you would go to people in Europe or other places and fly them in, and they would come here and they'd see it and they'd love it, but then they'd find they had family commitments, connections, and then after spending a lot of money and time trying to recruit them, they would often turn around and say no. And so very quickly we realized that you have to look at the talent that is available within your region in compatible industries, where they have the kind of the discipline, the commitment, the drive to be in the event sector, and then you've just simply got to train them. And the thing about that is that means that you become less focused on purely trying to fish in a small pond of people. You open up your horizons to more people, and also when you bring in people from different industries, you bring in fresh thinking and fresh perspectives. So it's not a bad thing. At the moment, as you rightly say, a lot of the exhibition industry stresses itself out about the fact that the industry is growing so much now since COVID, doing so well, but how do they find the talent? But they need to stress less about that. They need to think more not about how you take talent from each other, but more how you bring new talent into the industry, because it is a great industry. It's a fun industry. It's an industry that does a lot for the world in terms of generating new thinking, new products, new ideas. And therefore, for a lot of young people, it's a terrific industry to go into, and we have to be better at telling people that. And that indeed, coming back to, you talked to me about UFI, is one of UFI's objectives as well.
Again, grooming that new talent, because I think there is. It's a growing industry, and there's so many different layers. You might start in a junior job, but very quickly, I think if you're bright in this industry, you can do incredibly well.
You're right. I think that's the great thing. I mean, I found, I decided, I was saying the earlier part of this conversation today that I actually originally qualified as a lawyer, but didn't see myself doing that, and I went into events. And within 4 or 5 years of going to events, I actually in the UK became the managing director of a small events company, right? Very fast. Because at that point when I went into events, again, that was another period in which events were going through dramatic growth. And so if you enter as a young person now the events industry during this current period where it is enjoying dramatic growth, then you can, if you work hard and you take to it and you get on with it, you can progress your career at tremendous pace.
And I have no doubt your legal background's come in very, very handy over the years. Talk to me a little bit about technology and just innovation in the sector, because it has changed a lot too, and what best technology is really helping it move along.
Technology is a great advantage always for events, and the funny thing is that there's so many times, even pre-COVID, people have predicted the death of events. If you go back to 1440, Gutenberg invented the printing press, and at that point you had already quite a lot of established events, particularly on agricultural products like plows and stuff like that, new seeds and things in Europe, in Leipzig, in Frankfurt, in the Netherlands, in France and Luxembourg. And then suddenly the printing press was invented, and everyone said, well, why would people travel to events? No point, right? They read about it. They didn't need to go anymore. But actually, it was quite the opposite, as it has been in every moment of technological change. What happened was a revolution. People could print leaflets and pamphlets, distribute information, and events, again, with the advent of technology, didn't disappear. They went through enormous growth and change. And the same is true now with, if you look at online, if we come back to, say, ADIPEC, right, the world's largest energy show, it is the world's largest energy show. It does get 180,000 plus people, but not everybody can come. If you are a 25-year-old strategist in ExxonMobil in Houston, you probably won't be funded to travel 15, 16 hours to fly to Abu Dhabi, but you'd probably like to go because you're a strategist. All the big thinking's happening there. All the big ideas are happening there. All the new products are shown there. But now, because of the advent of technology, you can see that online, because now we can have the live event and we can also give people the virtual event. So technology is fantastic because you can bring your events now to people who couldn't otherwise come, and that will actually build also your customers of tomorrow. Because when that 25-year-old strategist at ExxonMobil becomes 30 and is maybe a junior director and now has the travel budget, guess where they're going? They're going to ADIPEC because they've visited it virtually and they know about it, they're very aware of it, and they want to be there. So technology is fantastic for events. It's additive, it helps. And again, the biggest one that everyone's talking about right now is AI. And AI, again, is fantastic because much as Gutenberg's printing press in 1440 allowed the distribution of more information, AI, again, will help us with visitors, because if we can now use AI on our data that we hold on customers to understand a lot more about them. When we have conference streams and different conference sessions and we want to identify what they're most interested in, we can find that out because AI will track and look at what they've been doing in a very kind of background way. They won't even feel it. It won't be invasive, but we'll be able to offer them a more targeted experience. We'll be able to come to our delegates and to our visitors and make sure that they get served up exactly the right sessions and the right content on our events. So technology will, again, allow events to advance tremendously.
Just so long as they don't replace the moderator, I'll be watching out for that one.
I don't think there's any chance of that.
But I was at a session recently, actually, where they did have an AI moderator. I mean, it had to be programmed by a human, and it was very cumbersome. It was curious, let's say, but it didn't have the spontaneity of people. It comes back down to, I think, that relationship.
Never will have, right? I mean, you and I sitting here together, right? And we've known each other for years, and we're friends, right? And we've been at a lot of events together. Nothing would beat
so you don't want
today.
my virtual AI?
I don't. I just want to sit and talk with you.
That's fair enough. Talk to me about sustainability. Events are huge. You were on one of the biggest ones. There's a lot of exhibition space. There's a lot of, temporary structures that are built and unbuilt and all of that. How important is it, and how do you manage to build that sustainability into every event that you deliver?
Sustainability is very, very important. I mean, one thing that's finally been recognised, and it took some research by Eithne and some other people as well to recognise that, is that one thing that people need to recognise that events are aggregators, right? So a lot of people might otherwise travel to meet government ministries or to find new customers or do things. And we found that particularly when we returned events back to Saudi, where people hadn't been able to travel, say, for example, out of Europe, and Saudi is going through extraordinarily exciting and tremendous growth right now. I mean, we see a lot of opportunity in Saudi, and as you rightly say, I think very quickly they will build a huge, wonderful venue there. We hear by 2027, and so with events, you would find that people would make hundreds of trips, right? And we had studies coming back from a lot of exhibitors saying that it was so good that we got back to Saudi, for example, because we would have had to make 100 trips this year, maybe with 7 different salespeople, 100 trips to meet 100 customers, whereas we were there for 4 days and we met 100 customers, if not more than 100 customers actually, because a lot of them met their customer base plus. And so events are aggregators, so they're not by their nature necessarily unsustainable. They save a lot of travel. But beyond that, the industry takes this very seriously. And during my presidency, one thing we have pushed at UFI is sustainability. So we're working with the venues groups to look at how venues are implementing renewable power to make sure that nearly all venues will eventually be powered by renewable power. We look at waste, and so we look at food waste, for example. So the food is either given to needy people from a lot of venues if it's still fresh and servable, or it's used for animal feeds. And then with waste from the exhibition, a lot of that is then put into recycling. So a lot of the wood product and fibre products are all put into recycling. But big initiatives also include things now such as sustainable stands. So now there's recognition for exhibitors who build a stand and then reuse it again and again at other shows. Now, that may mean that they design it in such a way that doesn't always look the same. So there has to be new techniques and technologies in stand designing, but essentially they use the same components so that there isn't any waste. So this is a big thing on making sure that events are sustainable. And we're also, a lot of event organisers doing offsets as well on travel. So everything's being done, and the objective is to take events within a short space of time to net zero as quick as we can do it.
And it's great that it's top of the agenda, I think, for people like DMG Events and indeed for other people around the world. So that, I think, is very, very important. What advice would you give? You mentioned about, young professionals coming in the industry, that there is great career prospects. But young professionals, smaller companies, in this very fast-moving, dynamic sector at the moment, what advice would you give to people who are looking at the entire region for events?
I'd say that, if you want to have in life, a sense of purpose, and I think, and you'll understand this as a journalist, right? And funny enough, my first idea was to become a journalist. I ended up in events a little bit.
Mine was to become a lawyer. There you go.
Okay,
and here we are together.
Right, we were transposed. But I ended up in events. But the reason I was, and this may resonate with you, the reason I was interested in becoming a journalist is because I wanted a sense of purpose. I was, like so many people, when I was young, which unfortunately now is a very long time ago for me, but when I was young, I wanted to be relevant. I wanted to matter. I wanted to change the world a bit. And I think that, through journalism, often the stories that you print, what you give out does change the world, and it changes opinions as well, hopefully for the greater good. And with events, I think that what people want to understand is that events are a good career because it will give you a sense of purpose. You will change the world if you're passionate. And that's what you need to go into events. You must be truly passionate. You must feel that you're not just doing a transactional event. You're not just looking for any speaker. You're not just looking for just selling product on a show floor. What you're looking for is to develop a market, is to have speakers that will give out information and ideas that will make that sector, that industry, that country become better, become a better place, and that the products on show are products that will help, the technologies that will enable countries or companies to go on and endure and become better. So if you go into events wanting a sense of purpose and you continue with that passion, that pure passion to want to change the world for the better, then you will succeed in events. It's all about passion. If you look at what the best events are, and you have a true understanding of that because we're very grateful that you moderate some huge people at many of our big events, right? And you know that if in that moment people talk and they come up with the best ideas and the best thinking, you can make change, you can affect change, you can do good.
You're so right, actually bringing the key people, and you get the key people of the world to an event. And I guess that's the aim. It's not just about, here's an event, fill some seats and put a few people on the panel. Exactly. It's the strategy that goes into that. And really, I think thinking and finding and making sure you have the very best.
It's true. It's the fact that you have a chance, for those few days that you run the event to influence through the platform of the speakers or through what's shown on the show floor. You have those few days to influence for good.
That's very exciting. I want you to sort of get your crystal ball out now at the moment, 5 to 10 years down the road, and it's something we ask all of our guests on Eventful Arabia. Where do you see the industry here going? I mean, what do you hope for? What do you look for? I know anything can happen, but give me a sort of sense, 5 to 10 years, what direction are we all heading in?
I'm really excited to say, 30 years on, I'm still very happy to have many opportunities, as so many of us did who live here, to move. And I've never taken them. I've stayed here. And I moved, DMG's events office, head office, to be here. We're the only, I think, global organizer in the top 20 that actually headquartered in the UAE. And I think we're absolutely in the right place, because if you look at the projects that they're developing here, just extraordinary. I mean, it's stuff out of science fiction. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, Saudi is incredibly exciting, as we talked about earlier. The UAE is also, again, doing so much. A wonderful place to be, all around the region in Qatar. And if you look as well, across into Africa, the pace of change there, the good governance, how places like, Rwanda have changed. I think there's huge opportunity in Africa. If we go back 30, 40 years ago into Southeast Asia, where people forget now, you didn't have good governance in a lot of those countries. You didn't have a lot of venues, and you didn't have a lot of good quality of life. That has changed incredibly. And that same change is going to take place in Africa. And again, not only is a lot happening within the Gulf and within our region, but we're on the doorstep of what will become the next most exciting region in the world. The region's got the most opportunity for growth, huge resources, both in terms of mineral resources, agricultural resources, and labor resources, and young populations. Africa will become the next bet 10 years from today. And again, as a company with DMG Events, we're working right the way across Africa in about 15 different countries with about 24 events. We see that as coming next. Here we see the next 10 years in this region, hugely exciting. 10 years from then, we think it's Africa.
Well, there'll be no slowing down for you, Geoff. We have to wrap it up there, but I want to thank you for your commitment, for your passion, for your great enthusiasm about the whole sector, and really for sharing your experience with us. It's been an absolute joy. So great to have you here, Geoff Dickinson, from DMG Events, and we'll talk more to you, because this show, Eventful Arabia, will continue, and I'm sure we're going to need you back for your expert advice. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.